So I feel like a lot of anime fans are asked this question. What do you prefer? The sub of an anime or the dub of an anime? Do you like hearing it with the original audio, with some like the original inclination and the original like the initial like emphasis on certain words that they have in the sub? Or do you prefer the way it's translated? Do you like the way that it gets transferred over? The way that it because how it sounds when it gets transferred over? Which do you prefer? And I've heard so much debate over the course of the entire internet, over the course of the entire community. And today, I am throwing my hat in the ring. Or not really, because I'm not arguing toward anything. I'm not here to make any particular kind of stance either way. I'm just here to talk about it, because I think the debate itself is so interesting to talk about. Especially because of the fact that I've always been on the fence myself when it comes to what anime I watch and how I watch it. Because I've always been like, some animes I like listening to how they sound in the sub of an anime, and there's some animes where I just prefer how they sound with the different voices. I feel like accents especially come through a lot more clearly when they're in English. I think there's a lot more like inclination that comes through a lot more clearly in English than it does from another language. Um, but for the most part, I have always watched animes in sub. I've always listened to the Japanese audio, reading through the English subtitles. A, because of the fact that just it makes it easier for me to keep track of everything. Because sometimes characters will speak so low or so quickly that I like miss some things that they'd say. So having the subtitles there helps. But then also because I have always loved the energy that's packed into a lot of animes that I watch. And I feel like the anime where this all started was with Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was young, I watched a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Power Rangers. I just posted a video talking about Power Rangers. I know you guys know about my love of that. And with Yu-Gi-Oh! I posted my ranking list not that long ago. I was saying that I always loved Yu-Gi-Oh! I always loved watching all the cool combos, all the cool cards, the monsters, all that fun stuff. I mean, the stories of Yu-Gi-Oh! I always thought were so interesting. But I will say Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the anime that made me love the Japanese animes a lot better. Like, hearing it in the original audio so much more. And this isn't I don't mean for this to be a dig at anyone who does like the dub of animes. I think the actors who do the dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! Who does like Dan Green, who does Yugi's voice, or Eric, who does the voice of Kaiba, or any of those other voice actors, they are amazing, and I love the voices and the energy that they bring to it. But I've personally grown to like the sub of animes better. And if you don't, that's 100% fine. I'm not knocking anyone for it. I just wanted to talk about why I personally do love it so much more. And again, you're free to disagree with me if you want to. I encourage it. Um, but with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think it was specifically around like Arc 5 where I really started to feel this. I just noticed like the differences between like certain scenes. Like I think I remember, and spoilers if you haven't seen Arc 5, but I also don't know why you're still watching if you've never seen it. I remember in Arc 5 there's a scene where Yuya is fighting against Yuri, and like Yuri's been built up as this like unbeatable titan, as this like top of the line duelist, as this like monster of a character. And I thought there's no way Yuya's ever going to be able to come out on top of that. There's just no way. It's just not happening. No. So, when that scene finally happened, and when we finally got the epic conclusion to it, when Yuya finally declares the attack that defeats Yuri, I always remember being so excited to see that get dubbed, because I was curious to see how it was going to sound with the English voice. And I did not end up liking it all that much. Like I felt like for all like the swelling of the music, the rage in that voice and the energy packed into the final attack, and just like the finish him off, the energy in that voice I thought was so much stronger with the original audio compared to where it was in the dub. And that kind of set that precedent for me for a lot of animes that I watch. I think like before Yu-Gi-Oh! I watched a lot of things in English because of that. That's just what was available at the time. But then I started growing to explore more with Japanese audio and more with other formats and that kind of thing. And I got to see just a massive quality change. I went to rewatch some of my old animes in Japanese. I just see just beautiful change with watching animes in the different languages and in the ways that they sound. I think I watched like all the animes that I got like traded for with I'm trying to remember My Hero. I loved in Japanese. I loved Fairy Tail when I started watching the final season of that. Why am I struggling to remember animes I've seen? There's so many of them. But just so many different animes like that I've seen. What was it? High School DxD, which I'm still coming to grips with the fact that I've admitted that is my favorite anime now. It's a weird world we're living in, guys, and I never thought I'd ever reach the day where I would feel comfortable enough saying that is my favorite anime, just because I know there's a lot of people who think very differently about DxD than I do. And don't worry, there's a video coming talking about that very, very soon. But like seeing all these different animes in the original audio, I thought is just so interesting, and just there's such a change to like the personality of these characters, the way that they display that personality through the voices, that I've always just loved and found so fascinating to see. And I always thought that there's so much energy and so much like the thing I love about anime is that because of how animation is done and how a lot of that looks, it's hard to kind of get a lot of expression to show in an animation. For some people, like they just don't see it at all, even when like you get the really well drawn in facial features and that kind of thing. Some people, it's hard to see that emotion. So a lot of the weight of that is carried in the voice and how the voice transfers the emotion of the line or the emotion of what you're trying to do with that scene. And I'll never forget when I was working on my own anime, and for those of you who don't know, I do have an anime I am working on. Do I plan to share it on here? Probably not, but I am working very, very hard on it. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about. But I remember when I was working on it with my buddies not that long ago, we were reading through a couple of lines, and I had this one line that I wanted to put in there of, "Why won't you die?" And my friends read it exactly like I just did there, and they're like, "Nah, I don't like it that much. That sounds a little too cheesy." So I asked them to read it out loud to me and tell me, like, how did they imagine it sounding? And that's how they did it. So I said, no. That's not how I imagine it being said. This is how I imagine it. It's not, "Why won't you die?" It's, "Why won't you die?" Like, imagine, like, the scene with Hulk where he's, like, slamming Loki into the ground multiple times over. Like, just that frustration and anger in that. The moment I changed the way I said that line, suddenly I had heads turning. I had them like glaring at me like, yeah, put that in there, we need that in there. And it just, that is a lot of where I think the difference between like how the sub and dub is done. It varies from anime to anime, but I've always felt like depending on who it is you have running these things, you have just such different inclinations to lines that you're getting across, so much different emotions that you're getting across scene to scene with the way the lines are recorded. And there's so many different animes, so many different examples I can think of. I'm remembering more as I say this. Ace Attorney, I remember. JoJo, I remember there being a difference between the sub and dub and how those sounded. JoJo especially, I remembered because, like, you have so many characters who speak with different accents. You have so many different people who come from so many different quadrants of the world. And not to say, like, I feel like it's lost on the original audio, but it's just, like, it's, like, harder to imagine that when you're reading through the audio because the audio's in English. So you imagine them talking with, like, an American accent, that kind of thing. So, like, I don't hear an accent, even though, like, I'm trying to, like, force myself to hear that when I'm reading through it. But then when I'm listening to their voices, I'm like, oh, yeah, no, there it is. Like, now I know this about this character. Now I understand these things about the character. And I've always found that just so fascinating to me, and just found it so interesting to, like, just see how that changes from show to show. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, too. I mean, like, are there any shows you guys listen to? Are there any shows you guys watch where you feel like that's the case? Where it's just, like, there's these, like, little differences you notice between, like, how it's adapted into so many different things? Do you feel that way with, like, how it's from the written word to the live screens? I feel like with a lot of anime and manga I've seen, like, the scenes and how they sound in my head and how I'm imagining them, you have so much pressure you're putting on the actors to kind of live up to the way your imagination fills it out. There's so many people who I think, like, do 100% live up to that. Todd Haberkorn does with Natsu. Uh, I wish I could remember the name of the person who does Ursa, but I am terrible with names. I'm sorry. I think like with the characters like Blake with Aaron, or Barbara with Yang, or Lindsay with Ruby, all of them do an amazing job at like getting that inclination of the voices down for what defines them as characters. Lindsay does a great job with like the childishness of Ruby. The sterliness in Yang, I think, is clear from who Barb is, and I love them. I love them to pieces for that. And I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that too. So let me know down below, what shows do you guys think, what shows do you guys think there's like a difference in how the show, I guess like the energy of the show, depending on the language that it's spoken in, or do you think that there is a difference at all? I'd love to hear that down below. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, rate, comment, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on this matter down below.